We welcome board members. We also welcome our consultants and also members of the public and those who are going to be speaking, presenting with us today. We have, I know I say this every meeting, but we have an aggressive, ambitious agenda. What I mean by that is some really important matters to go through. I want to start by excusing our Lieutenant Governor and our co-chair. She's been called away to deal with another issue on behalf of the state, so we'll excuse her today. So last month, I think you'd all agree with me, marks a milestone, a key milestone in our project, in our work. At our last meeting, you'll recall, in August, we approved the framework plan for the Point, which documents our vision for the site. Much has happened since then, including the public rollout of the plan at an open house, nearly 20 media interviews and news stories, nearly all of which were supportive of the framework direction. Meetings have been held with Governor Cox, Senator Romney, Senate President Adams, House Speaker Wilson, and other government officials and leaders. Presentations have been made to city leaders, state agencies, the Commission on Housing Affordability, economic development leaders, and interested community groups. Very productive meetings have been held with the advisory committee, dozens of interviews with potential contractors, a board work session on the cost of and planning for staff and consultants, meetings with entities proposing projects at the Point, planning for transit, coordination with surrounding property owners, and much more. And many of those meetings, if not most of them, were attended by our director and some of his staff, including Scott and some of our consultants. So a lot, board members, has gone on behind the scenes, really important work. And we're grateful for our director and those who assist our work in handling those communications in between our meetings, those critical communications. So where are we now? Now we start the push towards implementation. So during our meeting today, we'll address some key issues in the process, including building some partnerships, making decisions relevant to prison demolition, which is really not that far off, and coordinating several studies to further coordinate and refine our plan, prepared to engage development partners and provide critical information to help the board make the key decisions that we're going to be called upon to make. So with that, let's move forward to item number 2 on the agenda. Item number 2, as you all know, is time for public comment. This is a time where members of the public are welcome to share comments with us as board members, consistent with the procedures that we have approved and are set forth below and part of our materials online supporting this meeting today. So it's no surprise, I don't think, to board members, but from the beginning of our work, from the very beginning, we've sought and incorporated public input. I think it's been a key provision of the work that we've done. We will continue that practice. We welcome comments from any member of the public. Any of you who have joined, who members of the public who wish to address the board in person, if you would raise your hand virtually using that icon signal. Anyone watching may indicate their desire to speak by using, as I said, that raised hand icon. We've got some tech support here that will help identify you and for us as a board. And I understand that we do have someone from the public, and so I'm going to ask our staff person to help us unmute. Is that Senator Reby? Oh, Rebecca Oakley. I apologize, Rebecca. So Rebecca, you should be unmuted now, and we'll turn the time to you.
Awesome. I'm Rebecca Oakley. I am a nurse practitioner down in Utah County. I have started the only one in Utah, a home and community-based pediatric palliative care program. And we are looking towards the future of 2 or 3 years building a facility. There's 3 in the country right now, but a place where where kids with medically complex challenges can go for some respite, for some things. And as I looked at your plan, I was wondering if you have an eye towards kind of some facility that might better the community, that's much needed in Utah, that does not exist in Utah, that we might be able to put it at this location. Anyway, so our board of directors just asked me to touch base with this group, participate in this board meeting, and see where if that's even a possibility, and where we would go from here in that. So thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, and appreciate you joining us and your comments. I'm going to call on our director, Alan Matheson, to respond and see if we can't make a connection to follow up with you.
Well, Rebecca, thank you very much. And yes, we're getting to the point where we're going to start making some decisions about what will go at the site. And so the timing is very good. We have a process that we've put together. There's a document on our website at thepointutah.org that outlines a process for providing proposals that we can evaluate. And so there is a way to do that. Beyond that, I'd be more than happy to visit with you. We could set up a time to meet. Again, on that website, you can find contact information for me, and I'd be happy to visit.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Rebecca. You know, let me reach out to our staff. Do you know to raise their hands for the public? I think I don't have any indication. So with that, let's move forward to the next item on the agenda. You've all received a copy of the minutes of our meeting held August 10th. Those have been distributed by Cece. Thank you for doing that. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of August 10th, 2021, unless someone wants to discuss a change or change of wording on those minutes.
I'll motion to approve them.
Was that April?
Yeah, I'll motion to approve them.
Thank you, April. Motion is been made to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Jim Russell.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve said minutes. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? I'll rule that the motion carries unanimously. Thank you for your action on that item. Let's move down to item number 4 on the agenda. It's listed as cooperation agreement with Rocky Mountain Power. Today, the board will consider adopting a proposed agreement with Rocky Mountain Power to collaborate on clean energy technologies and strategies at the point. These strategic partnerships are going to be important for the Point's success, in my opinion. We're going to continue to work with experts to help bring the best resources to bear to achieve our vision for the Point. Today, we have the opportunity to consider signing a statement of cooperation with Rocky Mountain Power regarding clean energy. You have all received a copy of that statement in your packet. So to help explain that provision, I'm going to turn some time to Alan and also our director, Alan Matheson, and also we welcome John Cox, who is here live with us. It sounds like live in the studio, but anyway, he's live here with us in the meeting representing Rocky Mountain Power, and he'll also assist in providing background on the agreement. So with that, Alan, we'll turn the time to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, members of the board. So this is exciting. As Representative Snow mentioned, I think we've all recognized that strategic partnerships are going to be an important part of implementing the vision that we have for this site. So we're happy today to bring forward a statement of cooperation that begins a strategic partnership with Rocky Mountain Power. We'll be asking for your comments or approval of that agreement. This is, I think, a nice opportunity for us. One of the things that we've talked about is the importance of sustainability at the site, ensuring that we've got the energy needed to supply the uses at the site. This is not a power purchase agreement. There's no cost involved with it, but it outlines an opportunity for us to collaborate closely with Rocky Mountain Power on a number of things, including looking at energy efficiency programs, opportunities to provide clean energy to the site, renewable power generated on-site and off-site. There's provision for electric vehicles, looking at the technologies that are available, putting in charging infrastructure, exploring new technologies. There's also a provision in there indicating that we're trying to do all this in a way that is reasonable and manages costs to those that will be on the site and others. So again, we're looking ahead. We'll be working with Rocky Mountain Power on a load forecast, kind of get a sense for how much power we're going to need over time. We'll update that periodically and put together a plan for providing the infrastructure and the energy needed to meet the uses at the site. That's kind of the broad overview. We've enjoyed working with John Cox on this. I think most of you know John, former legislator, former key staffer for the governor, and he's with us today as well. And John would welcome any comments that you have.
Sure.
I think your mic is on, John. Welcome.
Thank you,
Good to see you again.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'll just be brief. I think Alan summed it up well. We're excited to partner together on this. I would say, just as a starting point, every 2 years we do an integrated resource plan, and we released ours just 2 weeks ago for the 2021 year. And it showed for the entirety of our customers a dramatic decrease in carbon emissions, a 74% decrease by the year 2030 and escalating from there. And one key piece of this agreement is that essentially what we're saying in coordination with the Point of the Mountain Land Commission is that if you would like more than that, we are happy to partner together to do that. I know sustainability is a key priority for this part of the state and for this commission. And it's certainly important to our company, and we want to customize solutions for the point. We mentioned in the cooperating agreement different paths that could be taken to accomplish that, but also we're open to other ideas that maybe haven't been used before. We believe this is truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the state, and we'd like to do it right when it comes to energy supply. Alan mentioned as well electric vehicle charging infrastructure. I just would call out one item, and that is at last year's session, House Bill 396 that allocated or authorized us to spend up to $50 million on EV charging infrastructure, specifically called out the Point of the Mountain, or the Point, I should say, as an area where resources ought to be dedicated. And so that's certainly something that we've looked at in our plan and look forward to future engagement on how best to collaborate together on that. So with that, I'm happy to respond to questions, but we're excited to partner together.
Thank you, John. Members of the board, questions for Mr. Cox, for John, or for our director on
I have a comment, Lowry, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
John, you and I worked together and others in 2019 on the Community Renewable Energy Act. And just to remind individuals listening in on the board what that is that it allowed communities in conjunction with Rocky Mountain to get to a net 100% renewable by 2030. And about 24 or 5 communities signed on. Some have not been able to do it, but I think there are about 20 plus now, at least, that are working through this. And what eventually would happen is that they've got a deadline at the end of this year, I think, or maybe it's, I've kind of forgotten, John, but to come together and to be able to then go to Rocky Mountain. And the utility then would go out and develop the additional, if needed, renewable resources. So help me with that, John, a little bit, but I think I've got it right. But this is very exciting. So to me, there is a nexus and a conjunction between this agreement that we're about to approve, and I'm wholeheartedly in support, of course, and Community Renewable Energy Act. Any thoughts there, John, to share?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Handy. Yeah, that bill was approved in the 2019 legislative session, as you mentioned, and it allowed for communities to pursue, as you said, net 100% renewable energy. I think it's helpful maybe just to take a step back briefly and sort of explain almost sort of the iteration of clean energy goals by either companies, communities, or others. Historically, it sort of began with companies procuring what are called RECs, renewable energy certificates. So it's essentially, there's a renewable energy resource that's already out there, and they're procuring the renewable attribute to claim a certain percent renewable portfolio. That still occurs and is still an option here for the point of the mountain. What occurred over time, though, is that companies wanted often additionality. So not just existing renewable resources, they wanted new renewable resources that they could say would not have been built had it not been for these programs. The same is true for the communities that you just mentioned, Representative Handy. In that case, though, and the chair of the committee here today actually sponsored a bill that allowed this to happen in 2016 for large companies, and Representative Handy did the same for communities in 2019. What that says is it's essentially a netting. So you take the annual overall demand for a community or for a company, and then you procure renewable resources that would be an equivalent amount. But that word net is important when we say net 100% renewable. It doesn't mean that you're serving them with renewable energy every hour of the day, but rather over the entirety of the year, it's equivalent. What we're seeing companies sort of on the cutting edge of this look at now today is 24/7 carbon goals. And so how do you provide solutions that truly are carbon free? And in this particular case, Representative Handy and the rest of the board, the point of the Mountain Land Commission could pursue any of those paths and perhaps some other one that we haven't thought of yet today. This particular agreement allows for all of that. It's essentially saying, though, that we want to partner together to find whatever that solution is that the point would desire.
Yeah, that's terrific, John. Of course, you're living with us all the time, and I just appreciate your tremendous, knowledge and grasp of this, and your excellent explanation for members of the board. So, what we would do here with the point, the concept of net would probably also factor in, right? That there would still have to be a base. Obviously, we have to have a base load.
Yes, Mr. Chair and Representative Handy, that's correct. And you could provide that baseload generation from a zero carbon resource, certainly as well. So, there's one institution in the state, an institution of higher learning, that had coupled together a solar resource with a geothermal resource to provide that type of 24/7 clean energy.
Yeah, I ran that bill too. Listen, but there is a geothermal resource on a site that I don't know that we've fully understood. Maybe Alan understands it, but anyway, enough. Thanks very much. Terrific explanation. Really a great initiative going forward.
Thank you, Representative. Other questions from board members? Comments? So I have a question, John, and as I've gone through this document, cooperation statement, I don't see anything in there that that sets up some sort of an exclusive relationship. In other words, is there anything that you believe that's in this policy that would restrict the board from looking at other energy entities that may be willing to cooperate and coordinate with as we move forward with the point. Do you understand my question?
Yeah, Representative Snow, Mr. Chair, you are correct. There is no clause of exclusivity here in this particular agreement. There is a line there that does say neither party would take any action contrary to the interests of the other party without first consulting with that party. So there is an explanation there that we would work together and notify each other of those desires. As a public utility in the state of Utah, we do have an obligation to serve all customers within our service territory. Certainly, a customer can provide their own on-site generation to serve the needs of that specific customer. And certainly in the cases that were mentioned before of commercial customers and others seeking to procure renewable assets, even though that may go through our system as a company, there are a multitude of private companies that can participate in those RFPs to provide that resource.
Thank you. And then a little bit of a follow-up. The legislation you mentioned that allows Rocky Mountain Power and essentially any qualifying energy company, but specifically Rocky Mountain Power, to spend up to $50 million to promote clean energy, particularly in the area of recharging infrastructure. And I would point out to the board that legislation specifically indicated two projects, as you mentioned, John. One, the point, but the other one was the inland port as well. And so I think as with respect to the point, we've made it a priority, and it's built into legislation creating this board, that we would seek ways to promote clean air and protect our environment. So this seems to be consistent with that direction and that philosophy, and I think I think the board generally feels that way. In your opinion, do you feel like Rocky Mountain would be prepared to, if you looked at our plans and our rollout and what we're talking about, the circulating vehicle, electric vehicles, that sort of thing, to support that kind of vision that we have? Is Rocky Mountain prepared? Do you believe that with infrastructure or plans for infrastructure that they could support those kinds of plans?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So we obviously have a public service commission that oversees all of those decisions. So we would need approval from that body to do that. But as you mentioned, by statute, we're directed not just to do it statewide, but to also focus here at the point of the mountain. So we intend to do that. One thing I would also add, there's a current debate going on, in fact, in House committees today and throughout this week on potential new funding opportunities for electric vehicle and other electrification options. And one thing that we've been very successful at doing in recent years is taking funding provided by the state or authorized by the state, including for EV charging infrastructure, and finding matching dollars from the Department of Energy. And so I would encourage this commission, as part of this collaboration agreement, to continue working with us to attempt to identify those types of opportunities, should they exist, for the point, to make those dollars go even further.
Thanks for your response. Any further questions from the board for Mr. Cox? I don't see any hands and no one's speaking up. Board members, you'll note that this is on the agenda for action. And if you would care to, the chair would entertain a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would move that we as a board approve the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority and Rocky Mountain Power Joint Clean Energy Cooperative or Cooperation Statement.
Thanks, Representative. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Nope, I think we already have.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, April. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the proposed agreement with Rocky Mountain, that we've all received a copy. Discussion to the motion. Any other discussion? Don't see any indication for further discussion, so I'll place that for a vote. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. I'll That it carries unanimously. Thank you for your help. And John, thank you for your explanation and answering the questions. We look forward to working with your company. Next item on the agenda, item number 5, is listed as historical preservation at the point. Board members, we anticipate demolition to begin for the current Draper Prison in about a year. It's hard to believe that that item is approaching, but we're getting that close. There's a lot of planning that needs to be done in preparation for the demolition. One element we need to decide is whether any of the historical buildings currently on site should be preserved, and if so, which ones. So we'd like to have that discussion today. That's why it's on the agenda. So with that, I'm going to turn the time to Alan to provide some additional background and explanation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Again, we believe that we'll have access to the site in about a year and be able to start demolition. Jim Russell and his team at DFCM have agreed that they'll oversee that process. And as part of that, they need to be going out fairly soon to engage a contractor who can do that work. Part of developing the scope is knowing exactly how much of the site will be demolished and when, and answering some of those questions. One of the issues is whether any of those existing buildings will be preserved for historical purposes. And we know that there's been quite a bit of discussion in the community on that topic, people on various sides of the issue. And we thought it'd be important to more formalize the discussion with the board, start leading towards some decisions. As background, we have looked at the facilities on this site. Horrocks Engineering did a survey. It's not a formal historical survey, but they've done preliminary work. They've looked at all of the buildings on the site. They identified a number that were built before roughly 1970, which is the 50-year period that might qualify buildings for historical designation. And based on their initial review, they've said that there are 27 buildings that were constructed before or during 1970, that 18 of those potentially could qualify for the Register of Historic Places. And of those, there are 4 that look like they could be significant historical structures. Those 4 include a building, it's kind of a wooden building that was used to house inmates who were constructing the prison. So it's the oldest facility on the site. And the others include Cell Block D, Old Cell Block East, and the old administration building, which is kind of the core of the site. We know that our planning team included those for illustrative purposes on the framework plan. There's been some conversation about including some of the guard towers potentially. So we're not coming with any particular recommendation today, but wanted you to know that background and then also know the process. So there's no legal requirement that we preserve or maintain any of those buildings. But there is a requirement that if we take down historical buildings, we need to do some kind of an offset to preserve the history of the site. And that involves working with the State Historical Preservation Office and identifying offset actions. So you might think maybe it's putting a little museum on site. Maybe it's carefully documenting all of the buildings and their use and keeping a pretty detailed record of it. The more that we preserve, the less of that offset we have to do. But that's going to be a discussion with SHPO as we try to determine what's an appropriate offset for actions taken. So I think that's the background, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Uh, let me explain to you what I would like to see us do today. You'll notice it's on the agenda for action. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to make a final decision today with respect to preservation, although we could. But I'd like to hear from the board members your thoughts, your genuine thoughts about whether we ought to be making plans to preserve and how far those should go and how we should proceed. So let's begin with April. Can you unmute your mic? And
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Thank you. This is one that I've had a lot of people come up to me and, here as a board, I take very seriously that we're representing the interests of all the citizens in the state. And I would say that 90% of the people that have made a comment about this to me are wondering, why are we trying to keep things with the prison? There's people that talk about bad vibes or those aren't good memories. And then there's a few people that are like, oh no, for historical purposes, you need to keep something. Now, that being said, about 8 years ago, I went to Boston and I stayed in the Liberty Hotel, which used to be a jail. And it's very industrial and it's neat looking. It didn't bother me because I'm not from Boston, like I'm not from there. But I just think that there's an enormous amount of people here that are like, we don't want to keep the vibes of a prison or what maybe, let's say murderers, I hate to use these words and stuff, but this is real. I would say that emotions are probably stronger, very much so that people don't really want to keep anything. So I just wanted to put that out there because that's not my opinion, but I think certainly when I hear bugs in the ear that I need to present that because I think that's what this forum is for. So I don't know if it's something small. I still haven't really seen a picture of exactly like, does somebody want to keep one guard tower? Are there groups that are trying to keep a lot of buildings? And then who's going to pay for those and what's the use of those buildings? So I just wanted you guys to kind of hear that and then hear what you've been hearing from the public.
thanks, April. Other comments, please.
Mr. Chair.
Please.
Yeah, it's certainly, prison has been in Draper City for, however long it's been built, depending on the age of the building. But I don't think we're in the business of preserving these buildings. They don't have any significant, architectural value. It's a prison. I mean, it houses the worst of our society. I suppose there's some preservation of the concept that there was a prison there, maybe the small museum that might incorporate that lock. That's probably the most unique part of the whole thing, that the lock in that oldest building that's similar to the one or like the one at Alcatraz. But other than that, I don't see this venture as being one that we should be spending time or trying to force a developer or user to fit around some old prison building, because frankly, none of them are impressive. That lock maybe that's what you do. You incorporate something into a museum or, some type of a small little museum about that to display that, since it's unique. And, maybe you can incorporate a tower, but the wholesale preservation of buildings, trying to make them hotels or whatever, I'm not interested in that at all. And I don't think it best serves this site or the citizens of Utah from the perspective of the type of tenants that we're trying to bring to the prison site. It'd be one thing if this was a building built in the 1800s, like the old Sugar House prison, which they tore down without any problems. These buildings they're not impressive. They're not, and I'm not personally interested, and I don't think most people would be, in trying to preserve what we did at the prison with respect to housing inmates. And that's just kind of where I'm at with it. I think we should do something, but it shouldn't involve large scale or even preservation of any of the buildings. It could preserve maybe that lock mechanism, maybe something like that in the museum, but that's my 2 cents on it.
Also, I think the public was kind of sold on, when they knew that the legislature was doing an enormous budget. I think it started out at $500 million and it's gone up to maybe 980 million to build a new prison. I think the communication at the time to the public and the citizens was we were getting rid of the old prison, like new one is replacing. Now that we start talking about, oh, we might keep some buildings, I think people would really struggle with that. But I know you're probably hearing from a historical society because they're activists, and I don't know if a lot of citizens out there even realize that we're talking about this piece.
Thank you, April, and thanks, Mayor. Further comments, please, from the board on the issue.
I have something, Mr. Chair. I have this, let me queue up here. And that is that I do agree with Mayor Walker. I mean, I don't think the buildings per se have any historical value. The fact that however, this has been the prison, the state prison, and everyone has known it as the point of the mountain since the early 1950s when it moved from Sugar House Park, should be recognized. I'm not certainly interested in preserving death row or anything like that, but there could be a tasteful way to recognize and commemorate what has happened there over all these many decades now, these 5 or 6 decades. But in terms of the buildings, no, they don't. To me, they don't have any historical value. However, some of you remember when it's been 2 or 3 years ago, I guess, that we had a board meeting across the street there at the Fred House thing, and we came across and got to tour the prison, and Lowry and I went and stood in a couple of the old cells, and it was interesting, but it was creepy. It was not very fun. And but I think that, right, Troy, it was not fun. But I think that something like that, a small scale recognition and commemoration of what has happened there, that could be tastefully done, but the buildings, no.
Thanks, Steve. And it was especially not fun when you tried to lock me in that particular cell. Further discussion, your feelings about this request.
So I'll just add my 2 cents worth. I kind of agree. I don't think any of the buildings should be preserved, but I think there should be something on the site to just a little monument or something just to commemorate that that's where the prison was for that many years. I mean, there's nothing at Sugar House, so we talk about it being there, and there's nothing there that shows that our prison was ever there. But I think the significance of what the old prison was compared to what it is now, I think that might be interesting to have that somewhere, and maybe that's at the new prison site, not at the old one. I think one of the selling points for the new prison is that we do corrections a new way and reduce some recidivism, and it's not about how people used to be housed in a really crappy, creepy facility that didn't lend to the rehabilitation. It's about what we have now, and I think to show where we're at now is helpful to show where we were, but I'm not sure that that's something that a story that needs to be told at this site. However, I think that we should have just something simple that would commemorate, or just show that was a prison site at one point.
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
I agree with what's been said. I personally don't know if we need to do anything there, but I would be totally okay with just doing some type of a monument or something that represents the fact that the prison was there. But on the other hand, I would be totally fine if we did nothing. I'm just not sure it's something we ought to be celebrating anyway. The fact that the prison was there doesn't mean anything to me. It's really what the future of that the point would be.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further, Mike Mauer. Mike, unmute, please.
I'll just say, as a historic preservationist, I think the prison was a huge part of the history of this area. And I think if you do a building or a guard tower or something, it could be pretty cool. I go to Trolley Square all the time, and they have a section there that's dedicated to the history of the Trolley Museum, and it's fun, and it adds to the ambiance of the place, and it's kind of cool. And so I think with this 600 acres, all this land we have out there, you could take either the building that the mayor was talking about or a guard tower and at least do a nod to the history of this place. Again, I'm a historic traveler. I'll travel 200 miles to see an old prison in Wyoming or something else. So I love the historic nature rather than just kind of a clean slate. and clearing the landscape and pretending like it never happened. Let's incorporate a little bit of the history there. And, it doesn't have to be a huge thing. I don't think we're going to look at doing a hotel out of a prison, although even that's an interesting idea. That may be our wow factor.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, I always get told that it could be a great bed and breakfast. Well, it kind of is already, but it's not a great one. I don't know how good the food is, but I think, maybe you could work a tower in there or something like that. But honestly, if you go in the place and you walk around it, it's zero special. You can stand in Ted Bundy's cell. Great.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. You don't want to glamorize it.
Yeah, great. There's plenty of crazy, nasty criminals that have lived out there, but I hear what Mike's saying. I do think a tower might be cool, and maybe you could do something to showcase the lock, because the lock is unique, but I think that's where it would fit. Bed and breakfast, though, I'm not going.
Alan, has anyone approached you with like a drawing of a guard tower, like what it could look like?
We haven't had any particular concepts that have been shared with us. We've looked around the country to see what others have done with prisons, and it's there's that Liberty Hotel, there's Liberty Lorton, which is a series of condos and retail in Northern Virginia. Philadelphia, as part of the Navy Yards, has a former jail that they've turned into a hotel. Any of these things would need an investor, a developer that would want to come in and invest in repurposing the site.
Right, but nobody's like approached or said, I've got to have this. We haven't heard that yet. And that should be telling, because a lot of people have been watching these meetings, and it doesn't sound like there's very much interest. So again, I'm back to what Mayor Troy Walker said, like, how do we just showcase that lock or some type of monument? And if somebody wants to keep a guard tower, if nobody's jumping at the proposal right now and spending any money or designing it, I don't know that we're the ones to really do that.
Maybe just to be clear, we have had several people that have expressed an interest in preserving some of the site, and they've identified some of the buildings and suggest that we do something, but no specific proposals that I've received.
Okay, yeah, because it seems like I remember talking about the open house that was interested, but maybe they're just kind of following along. They're not really going to be the activists, the ones actually doing something.
Well, we did have that group, Preserve Utah, that presented about a year ago, came to one of the board meetings and shared some thoughts. The Draper Historical Preservation Committee has had some meetings with us and shared some ideas and showed what others have done. But again, no specific proposal.
Alan, just so I'm clear, so as they've asked or they presented the proposals, they haven't presented any resources to go with it, right? That's something they would probably like to see done on the back of the state.
Well, what I've heard, no, I haven't had resources other than that there are federal tax credits available, 20% of the tax base that can go toward preserving these buildings and repurposing them. And that's what I'm aware of at this point.
For further discussion, comments from the board?
Just one other, Director Matheson and myself and a few others, we walked through with the Lieutenant Governor. I know she was seemed pretty much in favor of keeping a tower or something to commemorate, to show that the prison was there at one point. So I think we should keep that in mind as well, not to put words in her mouth, but I think she had a fairly strong sentiment to have something there.
Thank you. And she has passed those on to me as well. And it's important that, that those be recognized. And I will tell you, as one of the co-chairs, I haven't had a lot of communication, but I have had some with individuals representing the entities that Alan talked about, indicating a strong interest. Part of the problem I see is, I agree with you, Mike Maurer, about an interest in historical preserving history. But I will say most or many of those are related to really positive things, positive accomplishments, and I'm not saying that there isn't a lot of good that's done in prisons, and there is. We know that there is rehabilitation, and we know that there's education that occurs in those places. I think the challenge we have is to what extent, number one is, do we make some effort to accommodate a preservation? And then the second issue, if the answer is yes, to what extent? And there's two or three different levels, I think, expressed here. One is no interest in preserving anything. Another one is maybe a monument type interest, maybe a monument with a small museum, and then there's some interest for something much larger, including creation or restoring a building and making it into something else, an office building or lodging. My thinking is, and I don't want to drive this, but one of the things that could be considered is turning some time. I know that the saying about when you don't know what to do, you punt, but to a committee. But we could have asked for a smaller working group to work with our director and also with some of these entities and also our planner. And I don't know whether we would have to allocate additional funds. If we do something, in my opinion, it should be controlled by the board. And what I mean by that is that it should be something that we move forward on and not necessarily directed by someone that's directing it with an agenda outside. That's just my feelings, one voice. But we could take action today in terms of refining the process, perhaps with a working group to look at these issues and bring it back before this board with 2 or 3 alternatives. On the other hand, if the position of the board is that we not do anything, we could entertain a motion in that regard too and simply move on. I hope that that maybe helps. And I know I'm only one voice, but in order to move this process along, that occurs to me that those are a couple of alternative actions that could be taken. Any discussion on that, or
Mr. Chair, what about the, maybe take the position that we're not ready to do anything formal at this point, and we wait and see what our tenant situation looks like, what our development looks like, and let that be the driver of what can be incorporated if it can make sense. I mean, I think what Dave said's right on the money. It doesn't matter about, how we make it fit. I think we ought to see what the market, if the market can make it work in a way that we're all, in agreement with. But why try and shoehorn it into the market? That's my worry. Is I'd rather not do a working group and have something we're trying to force onto our market that's yet unknown.
And Mayor, in my opinion, that would also be an appropriate action. But Alan just reminded me, is the reason this is on the agenda today is demolition is around the corner. And if there's anything that's going to be preserved, we may be making those decisions soon. Doesn't necessarily mean today, but very soon. Alan also, I just asked him whether the towers in their current location would be part of the phase 1 RFQ or RFP that we're going to be sending out. He said it could be. And I think in fairness in that proposal, if we're expecting to retain any of that, it probably should be made a part of, or at least disclosed in that. So we've had a lot of discussion, and I've thrown out a couple of alternatives the mayor has. I think we're ready for a motion to move this matter forward. By the way, while you're thinking about a motion, that background pounding you hear, they're doing some construction here in the Senate building. Sounds like on the floor above us. And just didn't want anyone to worry about our safety and welfare. We're fine here, so.
It should be below you. Sorry about not being there to fix that for you. I would probably, I don't know about exactly on a motion, but I think that we should probably make a motion to just continue looking at this, but I would like to look at the maybe the towers and how they lay out in the site and have that brought back to a future meeting. My fear is that the really historically significant buildings, the ones with the mechanisms like Mayor Walker was talking about, they're just not in the right place. So to preserve them where they're at doesn't make any sense at all. I think it would be helpful to see where anything, the towers and any historically significant building, do an overlay of that with our master plan and see where they're located and come back and take action in the next board meeting. That would be my motion.
That's your motion. Do you mind? Well, I've got a question. Well, your motion is that we not, that the only action we take today is that we conduct further study to see where some of those current structures lay on our existing framework and how they could be preserved, to what extent, and to bring that matter or those issues back before the board our next meeting. Is that statement?
Yeah, you did it better than I did. And let me clarify that again. I think that really the push is, what do we do before we demo buildings? And I think we'll find that there's none of the buildings that are there right now that would be significant. Do we want to stay in that location? They just won't fit in the area that they're sitting currently. So I think it would be helpful to see that and know for sure.
And I assume, Jim, that would be part of the review.
Yes.
So as part of your motion, who do you want to participate or conduct that review?
Oh, I think we would ask our master plans to overlay the current location of the historic facilities there. If we want other historical architects in the area to weigh in and give some options, I'm sure that I could arrange to have some of those do it without any fee.
Would we have our director lead this review?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. So let me restate the motion that the only action we take today is to identify a process to review how the historical or the buildings that are currently there, the structures, and see if there is a way to incorporate some of them into the plan and what that would look like as an overlay to our framework plan, and have Alan, our director, work with Jim and some of his staff and also our planners to see what could be done to accommodate a preservation plan. Does that state your motion, Jim?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Do I have a
Question on the motion. That doesn't mean that we're looking at preserving it in those buildings, because I don't support any of the building preservation, no matter how it lays out, because I don't think they should be preserved. Is that what you mean? Or do you mean just looking at, I don't want it to, I'm not supportive of it, of any analysis on trying to save buildings, because that's just my view. But what was is the intent of your motion that we are trying to, if the planner comes back and says, oh yeah, you could fit a bed and breakfast here in this building, you went to one or whatever. Is that what you mean? Or where are you at with that?
So would you like to clarify your motion, Jim?
No, I don't think it's an analysis of the building. I think we're just looking at where are they located and how do they fit into the master plan. I agree 100% with you, Mayor Walker, that I don't want those buildings to remain either. But I think we need to go through the work as a board, because there is some sentiment that people would like the historic buildings. I think we just need to go through and do our due diligence and show whether it's even feasible or not. Likely not. But I think my point is just to look at how they lay out on the site. If there was any element of the buildings that you're talking about that would be preserved, I think we'd see that we would not want to preserve them in their current location, which then lets us know that for demo, we don't need to preserve them through the demolition process, or not preserve the buildings intact where they're at, just maybe elements of them. I think we just need to get that conversation moving forward.
So Jim, as I understand it, then there's no part of your motion that indicates that this is with an eye towards actually a preservation. It's just part of the review to see whether that's even feasible. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. We're right in the middle of the motion process. Alan would like to make a comment. We're going to ask you, Alan, to hold it until we see whether there's even a second on the motion. So does anyone?
Second, I'll second that, Lowry.
Representative Handy, second. So discussion of the motion, but part of the discussion, I'm going to turn some time to Alan.
Just because I think it's relevant to that motion, SOM did a review of the existing buildings and whether they could be preserved. And just again, for illustrative purposes, they took those 3 oldest buildings that Horrocks Engineering listed as most significant, and they're included in the framework plan as part of the innovation district. So again, not suggesting that that has to be done, but I think that that evaluation of where the buildings are now and how they could fit in the plan has been done already. We certainly need to look at towers and other things if that's part of the motion. We can do that.
Thank you, Alan. That's helpful. And I know this doesn't follow Robert's rules closely, but as part of the discussion of the motion, Muriel, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you speak to generally how strong of an interest in the many surveys we've conducted of citizens who have weighed in on this issue? Has there been much? You should have it on now.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
Okay. It's a really good question, Representative. It has not been something that's come through as a common theme from a majority of the Utahns that we've engaged with. It's our sense that there is kind of a small and vocal group within the local Draper community that sees this as a top priority, but it's not representative of kind of the broader feedback we've gotten from, the Utahns that we've surveyed, heard from in our virtual and in-person public meetings, comments we've received via email or our hotline. It's just not top of mind for kind of the more broader community across the state.
Thank you. Thank you for that help, Miriam. So now the motion is still before us and we're in discussion. So discussion on the motion that's before us.
So Representative So, I mean, my motion could be amended to say that we look at just the guard towers then, if we already have an overlay of the buildings themselves.
So you would like to amend the motion, need to go to the second. Is that acceptable, Steve, amending it?
Acceptable.
So the motion is amended to just the guard tower. Is that correct, Jim?
Yeah, if the work's been done on the others,
Okay.
we can show that, but it would be helpful to know where the guard towers lay, if there are any that lay in an area that would be useful.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion now on the amended motion that's before us? The friendly amendment has been seconded. So I'm going to place, well, I was going to say something, but I won't. So I'm going to place that motion for vote. All in favor of the motion as stated by Jim and as clarified by him and as amended by him, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Now, it's not part of the motion, but I'm going to ask Alan if you would, if one of our board members wanted to participate in that review, is that acceptable to you? Absolutely acceptable to him. If any of you have an interest in participating with Alan, it's not an official working group, but you're a member of the board and he would appreciate and value your assistance if you would care to. All right. Good discussion. Thank you very much. We're now down to the executive session on our agenda. You will recall that our framework plan really provides a significant vision and important direction as we begin to now implement the vision. We have recognized, however, that we need more information to refine the plan and to be ready to issue our RFQs and or our RFPs to the development community in the next few months. The supplemental studies to provide that information are listed on the agenda that each of you have. Our staff have reviewed proposals and interviewed candidates for those positions. Pursuant to Utah Code 54-2405, It's my recommendation that we now go into closed executive session for the purpose of discussing the candidate's qualifications. So with that, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing the qualifications of the candidates to perform those supplemental studies. For those of us who are here live, we have a separate room that we will move into. For those of you, almost all of you who have joined virtually, you have received, I believe, instructions from CC to move into executive session. Am I right about that, CC?
I think Colton probably sent those instructions, but I'm pretty sure they have a link. They know where to go. They have an invitation on the calendar.
All right. So with that, I would entertain a motion to move into executive session for purposes I've indicated.
Yeah, so moved.
Was that you, Representative Handy?
Yeah, Steve. Yeah.
Moved by Representative Handy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Moved and seconded that we go into executive session. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and we will shut down this public portion of our meeting and move into executive. Thank you very much. So are we back now? Because I'm looking at a screen that just has the point. Oh, you're seeing the same thing. But our board members are with us? Okay. All right. All right. We are back now in the public room, and I don't have a screen that shows all of you board members who have joined virtually. And I think there's, pardon? Okay, you've got it there. Okay. So it's kind of an unusual situation. I'd entertain a motion to come out of closed session, but we're lacking a quorum. But let's go ahead and take a motion anyway.
So moved, Mr. Chair. So moved,
So,
Mr. Chair.
Representative, do I have a second to represent?
I'll second.
Thanks, April. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Aye. That motion carries unanimously. We are now back in public session. So for anyone in the public listening, we now are short a couple of members to a quorum, and so we did not commence any of the process that we anticipated undertaking in the executive session. And so consequently, there's no action to be taken at this point. And the reason we didn't that is, as I said, we're lacking a couple of members to make a quorum. So that brings us near the end of our agenda. There is a matter that I don't think is on the agenda, but I wanted to inform you and ask for your help. I think all of us recognize that in Utah, we have a housing challenge. It's significant, and it doesn't matter whether it's on the north end of the state or in the south end of the state. There is insufficient supply to meet the demand, and the existing inventory is often less affordable. In May, you may recall, we adopted a resolution to explore ways to help address housing affordability at the point. Some of us have had conversations with folks representing the Legislature's Commission on Housing Affordability, including myself. Senator Andrick reached out to me, but I know that our director and maybe Scott and others have been involved in some communications with that commission on what we're going to do at the point. And it's an especially, in some ways, an important conversation because it is a state-owned project, and I think we need to try to the extent possible, at least to try to address those issues that are statewide. So the co-chairs, Senator Andrigg and Representative Waldrop, are interested in being a resource to us in exploring strategies to provide attainable housing at the point. So in my conversations with Senator Andrigg, he was actually bringing up the prospect of someone in their commission actually running legislation that would be directed to the point. My comment to him was, rather than take that kind of drastic action, I think it would be a good idea if we have some direct conversations between members of his commission and members of our commission on this issue. And in speaking with our director, Alan has agreed with me. So my proposal is that, and I know that we're all stretched kind of thin, but see if we can't convene part of our membership of this board to engage in conversation with the commission that I've identified, Legislature's Commission on Housing Affordability, specifically as it relates to the point. So I'm having this discussion with you to ask if there are volunteers that would work with Alan and his staff and participate in that dialogue with members of the Affordability Commission.
I will.
Okay,
I'll help.
that was April, is that right? And the reason I don't have your picture, so I can't see a hand or anything. So it sounded like April.
Yeah, it's April. I'll help with that.
Thank you very much. Anyone else that would like to be a part of that discussion? Well, I would like to be a part of it if we can do that by Zoom, depending on my schedule. And I won't press any of the others of you. We're missing a few members, and I'm going to ask Alan to extend the invitation to everyone as well. If you have an interest and would like to help on that issue, let Alan know. So that brings us up to adjourning. Thank you very much for being a part of our meeting today. Alan's going to work with members of our board to see if we can't reset to undertake the issues we were going to take up in executive session. Thank you, members of the public who joined, and our consultants. Thank you for your help today. So with that, even though we are technically shy of a quorum, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you for the motion. Do I have a second to that motion?
This is April. I'll second.
Thank you, April. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all. We'll see you around or see you a little later. Bye.